Hi, good evening or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Whenever you hear this show or see the show, you can do both. You can go audio or video on this one. We're doing both. So if you want to just hear the audio, you can do that. This is the Dave Emmons show, and this is Dave Emmons. And my guest tonight, I've talked to this fellow before, is Trey Hudson, and he's got a fabulous book that's it come out in 21 fall of 2021, and it's actually a Skinwalker Ranch type book of the South. Let me tell you a little bit about Trey Hudson. He grew up in Atlanta, and he was an Eagle Scout, and I guess he went into backpacking and trips, and he does that now. That's what he does. He's boots on the ground when he does his investigations. In 1982, he was awarded scholarship to attend the prestigious American Wilderness Leadership School, so that got him in, I guess, what you could say. He'll talk about his adventures. In 1983, he graduated from Norcross High School. That dates him. He's younger than I am, so it doesn't matter. He entered college, University of West Georgia, and decided to do a major in psychology. UWG is home, the world-renowned psychology department, and a few universities have that program there, where they have it at UWG. Trey had a chance to study with such luminaries as William Rowe, Mike Aarons, Don Rice, Chris Anstus, and others. And Trey was awarded a U.S. Army scholarship while ROTC cadet, and was also inducted into two honor societies, Phi Gamma Bu and Omicron Delta Kappa. That's
Yeah.
a, that's a familiar word, Omicron. In 1987, he completed his bachelor's degree in psychology, and then he was commissioned a second lieutenant in U.S. Army Reserves and branched as military intelligence. And he might tell you a little bit about that. He's retiring in April from those types of duties. After college, Trey worked as a private investigator, investigating insurance fraud, and also Army intelligence officers basic course at Fort Huachuca, Arizona in the spring of 1988. He was certified all source intelligence officer, and he was involved in a lot of intelligence operations, homeland security, counterintelligence, emergency management, physical security, personal security. He's done it all in that area. He has taken many courses in weaponry. And in 2008, 2009, Trey served a tour in Afghanistan. And thank you so much, Trey, for that duty. That's not a whole lot of fun over there. And he was working as an operations and anti-terrorism officer. Trey is also EMS, first responder, combat lifesaver, and he was given Achievement Medal for civilian service, the Commander's Award for civilian service twice, and the Army Superior Unit Army Global War on Terrorism Civilian Service Medal, and the NATO International Security and Assistance. Wow, he's married and lives in the southern USA. And what a background in military intelligence and the military, Trey Hudson. Thank you so much. And is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know who that interesting fellow was you just described. I mean, yeah, what I tell people is I am an ordinary guy. There is nothing at all special about me. I just have had some really extraordinary opportunities in my life and some extraordinary experiences. But I am certainly nothing special.
Well, your resume sure says a lot for you. You're a progressive guy, and you don't let any dust collect below your soles of your feet. That's for sure. So, but this is what probably got you involved in research and probably going, on boots on the ground. We talked earlier, and I know this is on top of everybody's mind right now. And since you do work with military intelligence, you don't know exactly that department. We were talking earlier that I don't want you to talk about anything outside of your top secret security clearance, but I just wanted to get your opinion on what's going on with all these shoot downs of balloons and all.
Ah, yeah, these balloons. The cool thing is I'm not involved in that part of the world, so I can talk freely about it. I can speculate like everybody else. But this isn't a speculation just from some dude. I was trained in intelligence collection methodologies and all that. The balloon that was attributed to the Chicoms, the Chinese communists, uh, I have no doubt was actually an intelligence collection apparatus of the People's Liberation Army, the PLA.
Right.
It had all the earmarks of a high altitude balloon with intelligence collection platform attached to it, and it probably was collecting communications intelligence, electronic intelligence, photographic intelligence, something called MASSIT, which is measurements and statistics intelligence, and all kinds of other ints I can't even think of. So it was an intelligence collection platform. I have every reason to believe that the intelligence was not stored on board of that aircraft. That as soon as it was collected, it was probably uploaded to a sat link and sent back down to China.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the kind of worrisome thing is it transited the entire CONUS, the entire continental United States, starting from the Aleutian Islands, transiting through Canada, down into the northern U.S. and across the U.S. side into the Atlantic. What I am hoping is that there was a platform that the DoD had that was able to stay with that asset and jam any outgoing signals. I'm really hoping that was the case.
That's what they said. They said it was jamming it. Yeah, but how much?
Yeah. So, all it takes is one little gap, for information to get out. Now, if that was in fact, the case, it was a boon for U.S. intelligence to watch this thing and take measurements off of it as it was doing different types of collection. They would be able to interpret and intercept the frequencies that it was transmitting back to the Chi-Com zone.
Mm-hmm.
They would be able to look at the different antenna arrays to get an idea of what kind of emanations that the Chinese are interested in. So, I'm hoping that we got more than we gave, and like every U.S. citizen, and first and foremost, I'm just a citizen like everybody else. I want the integrity and the sovereignty of our nation to be intact,
Right.
when I go to sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do have every confidence that that was in fact what people said it was. And now we turn the page. Now we have these other shoot downs, these other craft that have been supposedly taken down by DoD and Canadian assets. Those are kind of the outliers because from what I'm reading, and I'm like everybody else, I'm just picking this up on open source, uh, that these things have odd shapes.
Right.
And you mentioned it earlier, like the
Yep.
octagonal thing.
Octagon, yes, and the capsule looking the tic tac. Yeah.
In the capsule. I find that very unusual. An octagonal thing doesn't really meet, what I would think would be the aerodynamics of a balloon.
Yeah.
That
And
would be,
Trey, a while ago, you mentioned also in our pre-talk here that you said they use Sidewinder missiles, not Sidewinders, but they use those missiles. Those are heat-seeking. And
Mhm.
why would they use a heat-seeking missile on if it's a balloon or some kind of hydrogen-filled apparatus? Why would they use it on that? And they actually missed one time over
Yeah,
Lake Huron. Yeah.
yeah, and the only thing I can think of on that, and like I'm not an aviator, so I'm not shooting. I don't have experience with air-to-air combat, but the only thing that comes to mind on that is the balloon envelope might be warmer than the ambient air temperature, so it would have a little bit of a heat signature. And the Sidewinder missile might have been the best worst option, if that makes any sense, to
Yeah.
deal with this. Uh, Running it with guns would poke little tiny holes in it. And from what I've read, on researching this, it would take it a long time to deflate. What they wanted to do is when they brought the object down in U.S. territorial waters, they didn't want to risk it floating outside of U.S. territorial waters. They had to drop it inside of the 12-mile limit.
Mm-hmm.
So we had every salvage right to that thing. So I think that that made sense. Why they did it that way.
But why they're keeping everything secret, Trey, is beyond me. If it was a group of college boys that are girls that got together and made these objects and floated them 20,000 feet, that's not impossible for them to do. Like you were talking
Yeah,
about here. If they shot those down, well, then that would make them look foolish, and then also it also make them look foolish if it if they really were UAPs or UFOs,
yeah,
and they're keeping it from us. And a lot of people now are thinking, okay, the more they wait, the more we start thinking. Our imaginations go
yeah,
crazy, Trey, and us in ufology, and you know a little bit about this too. And there's some people, like I was talking to you earlier about some talking heads, who think we're crazies, the average person, and only if you're a military person or an airline pilot do you have enough sense or brains to know that you're seeing a UFO. But I can tell you what, I know a lot of people who've seen UFOs with witnesses, and you can go to court and prove it. And these talking heads sometimes get on my nerves. I'm sorry to say that, but they really do. I don't want to mention names, but
Yeah.
you know one of them. Trey, just I guess, what do you think about the political ramifications on all this?
I think probably the political ramifications are, and I'm not going to delve into partisan politics, but I do think the political ramifications are that we had our defense apparatus geared up, especially NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, uh, was looking at a particular type of signature for an adversary, a fast mover, detectable on radar at a certain altitude. And I think that they had set our apparatus to detect certain incursions fitting that particular criteria. I don't think they were set up to detect something that's slow moving at a very high altitude and doesn't have much of a radar signature. The feelings on that, I believe, are you can pick up a lot of false alarms if you have your aperture too wide. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like your filter too wide on a radio and you're not filtering out the spurious signals. You get a lot of junk and you quickly get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the I don't think we were really looking at balloons, which, balloons as an intelligence collection platform is very old. Project Mogul was an old balloon intelligence operation by the Air Force back in the Cold War
Mm-hmm.
to detect radiation or atomic explosions over Russia. I think the Chi-Coms did something that was asymmetrical. They put their strengths against our weaknesses, and they went back to an old technology. The good news is we figured it out now, and so maybe we'll be a bit wiser next time.
Okay, let's get into the real reason this is all this impromptu between Trey and I. So we just wanted to talk about it because it's a timely matter right now. Let's get into your book, The Meadow
Mm-hmm.
Project: Explorations into the South's Skinwalker Ranch. This was down south, and you went with a group of people and you done some research there. Could you,
Mm-hmm.
and also Philip Mantle, needed to give him a shout out.
Yeah.
I had Mark Ollie on last week, and
Oh, okay.
he's one of Philip's publishing people, and he's also publishing your book. Philip Mantle is, and he's wanting you to do a second part on
Yeah.
this book. And
Yeah.
now, since you're going to be retired, you might be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I will have. Actually, my wife said, you should be able to knock that out. Much to the delight of some and the chagrin of many.
Yeah,
So yeah,
writing's a tough job. I you know I,
it's a lot harder than people think it is.
I yeah.
But yeah, we've been looking at the Meadow Project, or this area since July of 2016. And people say, when was the last time you were at the Meadow? Well, literally, it was Sunday was the last time I was there, a few days ago.
Really?
So it's it is an ongoing research project, and we had some amazing things happen even as recently as Saturday. So it is a place that is continuously intriguing us, and it will throw you a curveball when you think you've got it figured out. It will do something entirely unexpected.
Right. Are you going with the same crew every time you
Yeah,
go? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of like the Skinwalker Ranch type of thing. Could you tell us some of the strange things that you've seen there when you first started, and
Oh,
what got you interested in this, Trey?
yeah. What got us started is actually my background is as a paranormal researcher, a ghost guy, if you will. That's the University of West Georgia. At that time when I was there, had a Dr. William Roll, very famous parapsychologist. So that's kind of my extracurricular background is as a ghost guy. So I was going to look at this haunted road, that all these people talked about in folklore in this particular area, and so we were, looking at this haunted road, and we had this remarkable UFO encounter, back at our base camp where we had an object, rise up over the horizon, a white circular object, and then it transited sideways, the black dot in the middle of it. The black dot got larger until the object completely disappeared. But when that happened, it's like, well, forget that haunted road business. Now we really got something cool going on here. So we decided, back in like July of 2016, we were really going to start looking at this area. And this that was back in January of 2016. So we returned back in July to really start looking at this. And about a half a mile from the base camp where this UAP encounter had happened was a large field. I'm going to paint a picture. Imagine a beautiful mountain meadow. This weekend, it was just absolutely breathtaking. It was so beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Mhm.
And we thought we're going to use this meadow as kind of a base for research for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's open. So if you're out there in the open and you have a clear view of the sky, if there's anything transiting the sky, you'll be able to see it. Number two, it's a big open field. If something moves across it, like a cryptid, you're going to be able to see a track line. This area, folklorically and recently, has a history of cryptid sightings. Number three is it's open enough where if you put teams in it equipped with infrared and night vision, they'll be able to see something transiting it. And number four, there's a ridge adjacent to it that you can put a team up as a LPOP, listening post, observation post, and they can look down into the field and see things moving around. So it's like, this field make a really good place to research and investigate because our likelihoods of capturing something anomalous in this open area would be higher than other places. So we started looking in 2016, and right off the bat, we had an individual experience missing time. We had an individual who was transiting the meadow, and while the team is watching them, through their equipment and with their naked eye, they saw this individual turn into a ball of energy, a light source, and move rapidly across the field. We were literally discussing that this weekend, and we're retracing our steps when that happened. The individual that had the missing time and turned into the light ball of energy had odd tracks on his GPS. His GPS showed him being places that he never went, like across a small river, yet he doesn't recall going there, and his clothes weren't wet. So how did he get there? Uh, and we orbs, watching us from camp, which is really strange because we had orbs watching us, watching the camp as recently as Saturday night, this recent Saturday, and had a
Are,
white. Oh,
are they
sorry.
white? Are they white in color, Trey?
The ones that we saw back in 2016 were green. The one Saturday was red.
Okay.
Now, I've seen red orbs in this vicinity, and what folks need to realize is kind of like Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Valley in Utah. It's not just the ranch that is anomalous; it's that whole area. And the same thing with this. It's not just this meadow that's anomalous; it's this whole area. So, I've seen orbs personally there in the field. I've seen orbs in the general area, and we're seeing orbs as recently as last weekend.
Wow, that's amazing. You guys stay together and keep doing this ever since 2016.
Mhm.
And Trey, you mentioned other also in your book here. You said there's a lot of other places, not just like in Utah where they got the Skinwalker Ranch. You have Hessdalen Valley in Norway,
Mhm.
Bakia Forest in Romania, if I'm saying that right.
Mhm.
Japan's Okigagara
Yeah,
Forest. I'm tripping on that one. And
yeah,
Mesa Verde, I know that one in New Mexico.
yeah,
Stardust Ranch near Rainbow Valley, and in Arizona, and of course, legendary Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. I know Arizona is loaded with energy like
yeah.
in Sedona. Uh,
Right.
so, have you been to these other places too, Trey?
I was at Mesa Verde, Colorado, back in October. So I was there just a few months ago. I have not been overseas. I would like to go to the Norwegian Hesselden Valley in Norway. Haven't made it out there yet, uh, and I haven't made it to Japan yet. I hope to be able to visit some of these places once I retire. But the really cool thing is, we hear about these places like, the Skinwalker Ranch in, Utah, and I've been out to Vernal, Utah, or, the Suicide Forest in Japan, all these mysterious places. And we think that these areas are unobtainable. But what I've discovered is if you start doing your research, any good investigation starts with research.
Right.
And you were teasing me and dating me, by my high school graduation. Is I was an intel officer back during the Cold War, back in the days before, you know, phones and all of that. And the way we were taught is we would take a large military map, tape it up to the side of our TOC, our Tactical Operations Center, and take a piece of acetate, plastic, and overlay. And we had grease pencils, and we would mark, enemy axis of advance and
Hmm.
positions and all of that. And so I take that same kind of philosophy. And if folks will take a map of their area where they live or somewhere they're interested in, and they start going and looking at different databases like BFRO, Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and look at the open source reports and start putting a brown dot on their piece of acetate where they've had Bigfoot sightings. And now they go back to the local library or the local folklorist and they start looking and reading about ghost sightings. And they take a yellow dot and they put where the ghost sightings are. And then they go to MUFON's database or some of the other wonderful databases out there for UAPs, and they put blue dots. And they're going to see concentration. They're going to see clusters. And these clusters are the places that are really starting to rock and roll. And those are the places that you can concentrate your research and you'll most likely get results. And the cool thing is this might even be in your own backyard, literally and or figuratively. It might be just a few miles from where you're sitting, your listeners are sitting right now. If they do their own research, they can have their own Skinwalker Ranch. They can have their own meadow and not even really have to leave the county they live in. All it takes is a little bit of research and perseverance.
Trey, what do you think these locations are? I mean, like Skinwalker Ranch and the Meadows and these other places. Are these where there's UFO bases, ET bases underground, Trey?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is my theory, my theory only. I think that if we're looking for, you know, beings in Zeta Reticuli, jumping in their cosmic Cadillac and driving over here, I think that's probably not the way to look at it. I think this is so strange and so other that we might not even be able to conceptualize it. John Keel, the famous, high strangeness investigator,
Mhm.
had a term, and he called these beings ultra terrestrials. And John Keel's philosophy is he didn't separate UFOs and cryptids and ghosts out into separate disciplines. He looked at it holistically, like they were facets of the same diamond. I think John Keel was on to something, calling them ultra terrestrials. The term I use is paradimensionals. I think these are beings, entities, intelligences, or whatever that are from another dimension. And I'm not necessarily talking about a dimension away from us, but maybe a dimension within us now that
Oh,
we just can't conceptualize it.
mhm.
And I think there are certain places for whatever reason, and there are theories about electromagnetism and plasma energy causing very small singularities where things can pass almost like a tiny black hole. And I think there are places, maybe perhaps because of their natural features, be it high concentrations of quartz, magnetic anomalies, where the dimensions get real thin. They get very, very thin, and things can pass. Intelligences can pass one side or the other. Energy can pass from one side to another. And I think these places are very special, and I think they've been sacred, going all the way back to Native Americans and maybe even before then.
That might explain your fellow researcher turning into a ball of light or
Yeah,
whatever, and
yeah,
then moving from place to place, and he didn't even know it. I
yeah. It,
My experience with ETs is that they do use electromagnetic energy, shocking, and it's real staticky. And they also use it to erase your memory or dumb you down, where you just sit there and you're looking. You can use your eyes, but you can't use anything else. And then they use light. There's a light frequency they use to erase your memory, and that I've seen too. But yeah, they utilize all sorts of, I guess, um, I guess technical knowledge that we don't we really don't know or aware of right now. And you're right about dimensions; it's right in our face, Trey.
Yeah.
So, what about the other anomalies? Like these guys at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, they have these headaches. They have other problems. Have any of your
Ah,
guys have that? Have any of your guys, Trey, had that problem?
yeah. Unfortunately, we've had team members die.
Really?
Yeah, and that is a very interesting point. There are certain attributes that can cause disorientation in people. I had a extreme case of disorientation in the meadow, a very extreme, so extreme that I believe if I had not been with a fellow researcher and had radio comms back to our base camp, I could have ended up in one of David Paulides' books.
Hmm.
You know, I would have gone missing because I was that disoriented. We know that certain sounds, infrasounds, can cause disorientation and headaches. We know that certain RF radio frequencies uh, in about the 1.3 to 1.6 gigahertz range can cause headaches, which is interesting. You brought that up because there are some studies now that DoD personnel that have had close encounters actually have a alteration of their brains. There's been some studies that their brains will show scarring very similar to multiple sclerosis scarring on their brain. So there's anybody who gets into this type of field and is really jumps feet first into the high strangeness. I would be negligent if I didn't tell folks that there is a danger to it. Many of my team members have suffered, had health issues because of this. Headaches. One individual died unexpectedly. We had one of my team members, their cancer came back with a vengeance. And I've had headaches and stuff myself. So there's a whole lot of phenomenology that can cause this. And you mentioned something earlier is screen memories. In the study of UAP, UAP encounters, and other high strangeness events, people will have these events that they remember in a certain way. And you know this, you've heard this in your research, you maybe have experienced it yourself, is they remember something, they recount it, but something seems off in the remembering. Something just isn't right. They can't quite put their finger on.
Mhm.
And many of us believe that those are screen memories that are placed to hide something, that are an incident that happened that's deeper in the subconscious. So,
Yeah.
but of course, John Mack and Bud Hopkins, would use hypnosis and other techniques to really get these memories out so people could figure out what was going on.
Yeah, it's really tough to regress a lot of these dreams, and I've had some lucid dreams that's been regressed. And I heard somebody the other day, Trey, talking about a simple way of having dream regression is wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the bewitching hour. And
Mm-hmm.
you wake up at 3 o'clock and then you walk around a little bit and then go back to bed. And then when you go back to bed and then you go into a dream state again, they said that's when they regress dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Said dreams will occur. And I thought that's true because a lot of my dreams happen between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And it could be after I wake up, go back to sleep, and then all of a sudden I have these lucid dreams. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing a hat because I don't want that bright light on my bald head. It throws the
Uh, it's
no,
a UAP. It's no, it's just Dave's head. No, I'm
a
kidding.
little. Yeah, really. They used to make fun of my big head, but in high school. But my mom told me I showed her the hat the other day, and she goes, "She's 95. Get
Oh,
that she's 95." She looked at the video on the hat, and she goes, "That's an old man's hat."
and you're like,
I
well,
said, "Well, I'm an old man,
yeah.
so never, okay, but old but young, okay." Trey, I know that you've had these experiences and you're going to go back there and you're going to keep going back there until you find something. Have you had a lot of things on film? Anything that you've videotaped?
Yeah, we've had some pretty remarkable stuff on film. And I'll go ahead and apologize. Is I'm under a contract where I'm not able to release the stuff right now. We're in talks to hopefully release it to a much broader audience, and folks are just going to have to, just kind of accept that. But I do have video of some really remarkable things. One of them is we detected And I'm just going to use the word entity because that's the word that fits. We detected heat sources, man-sized, maybe 2 meters tall, 1 meter wide, in an area where we did not have any personnel. We run our operations similar to a military operation. We have an operational commander, a tactical commander who runs things out in the field. We have net control. Nobody moves off station unless they get permission from the tactical commander. So we have radio comms. We know where everybody's at. So we had nobody in this area where we were picking up these two anomalies. And what's really weird about them is we have this on FLIR, on infrared, is you have two anomalies. Let me back up. You have one anomaly. It shrinks down. Goes large again. It shrinks down to about a meter, goes back up to 2 meters, and then splits into two.
Hmm.
So very strange, very strange. Later that same evening, we had the infamous cube or box. Now let me put a big comma right there. Cubes or boxes, the more I research, are very common in high strangeness and UAP accounts. I don't know if you have had a chance to talk to Katie Page from Colorado MUFON.
No.
Uh, sh- she had a remarkable incident growing up in what became known as the Clearview, Colorado Ranch incident. And that was actually mentioned in the first part of Knapp and Kohler's book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, the very first book. And it was a ranch in Colorado that had a lot of the same high strangeness, cryptids, lights in the sky, in boxes, cubes. That's how she and I got to know each other. We met each other at a conference and we were talking about these cubes. In Brazil, there was a case of UAPs hunting people down that they called chupa chupas, suckers, which is Spanish, and they were shaped like refrigerators or boxes. At Skinwalker Ranch, there are reports of a large cube, like an RV, that would fly around. We also saw some of these cubes in boxes at the Meadow, and we were able to film the remnant of one right as it was fading away. And I was talking to the experiencer as recently as this weekend, and we were talking about what he experienced, and he was telling me just how vivid it was on his infrared, and we could only see it on infrared. And by the time he started filming, it had dissipated. And we dispatched a team to the area where this thing was, this large cube. And when they walked into the area where this thing had been, they disappeared off of our FLIR. We could no longer pick up their heat signature. We've tried to recreate it in vain to see if there was some way that the natural vegetation and terrain could mask their heat signatures, and we can't recreate it. We are always able to pick up their heat signature. So let me go back to the gentleman turning into the ball of energy. It was almost like there were two realities. One reality where he was just walking through the meadow. That was his reality. That's how he recounts it. And another reality where he was a dirt turning into a ball of energy. Both realities are true. They both exist at the same time, much like the dual slit experiment where light is both a particle and a wave. When they walked into the remnants of this cube, to them, they experienced like a darkening of their surroundings. Very dark, no no visual stuff in the sky, nothing like that. Very quiet, and the temperature dropped. That was their experience. Our experience was they completely disappeared off of our equipment. So there are two realities existing at the same time in this geographical location. That's a lot like these other strange places, is you have a split reality coexisting in these very special and very sacred places. So we have that on film of them actually disappearing. We have near the meadow, not at the meadow, about 2 miles away. We have films of two UAPs, which were very odd. And I'm a MUFON field investigator, and I used every trick in my magic sack to try to figure out what these things were. and I haven't been able to figure out what exactly these objects we saw in the sky were. So yeah, we do have quite a few things on film. And while we were filming the cube, our operator pans to the right, and lo and behold, there's two figures watching us from a small group of trees that did not correspond with any of our team members, which corresponds and links up very nicely with the two figures that we had seen earlier.
Now, you mentioned, I think, in your book that the men and women in black uh,
Hmm.
is are those the two that you're talking about, Trey?
No, that is something entirely different. That was a woman, a businesswoman we had waiting for us back at camp, and we've had some developments in that case since the book came out. Just to kind of recap it, we got back to camp and there was a woman waiting there, a businesswoman. This is in February 2017 in the middle of the forest, and she's wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer. Very much, out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And she seemed off. It was one of those encounters that you can't put your finger on exactly why she seemed wrong, but she was very, very wrong. And she kept trying to dissuade us to follow her down a deserted county road uh, to go look for something that she called monkey bears. She claimed that there were these creatures that lived down the road, that we should drop what we're doing at, 2200 or 2230 at night and follow her down this road. Very strange. And she kept just pestering us and trying to prevent us from doing our after action review from the cube experience.
Mm-hmm.
So she continued her very strange behavior. She even urinated in front of us, which is
Oh,
very odd.
yes.
And so I started, when I and she finally left, and I started thinking about this. Is okay in the lore, in the data, where do we see people that are improperly dressed, seem very very off? They try to dissuade experiencers from either recounting their experience or capturing it on paper or film, and they don't understand how human beings interact with each other. Well, I mentioned John Keel before. John Keel wrote about it in the Mothman Prophecy. There are men and women in black. That's the UFO lore is rife with this. But this is where it gets really odd. Is I was contacted by a psychotherapist in Istanbul, Turkey, about a year later, and he was actually contacting me about something totally unrelated to this case. And he said, "Hey," he goes, "do you mind if I ask you a question about this woman that you encountered in the forest? I heard you, on an interview." I said, "No, absolutely, not a problem." And he says, "Do you have her name?" And I said, "I do." And we actually did a little research and we found a person that seems to match this individual. But, we decided not to contact the individual because they were acting so strange and so bizarre, and their career required a license. We didn't want to perhaps damage the person's reputation. We weren't going to damage someone just so we can get a good research story.
Did
And he
she
said,
did she seem robotic, Trey, when she talked?
"No, no, she had a normal voice. She her whole demeanor was off."
Mhm.
And so this individual who later became my friend said, she said she went to a particular university. I said, "Yes." He goes, "What was her name?" And I said, "Her name was Jane Doe." Obviously, that's not a real name. And he goes, "I think I know her. I think I studied with her in the master's program." He said, "Would you mind if I contacted her?" I said, "No, please. I'm very interested in the whole experience because it was just so unnerving to my team, and I would love to interview her." And so he contacted her, and she understandably declined to be interviewed by me, but he did talk to her at great length. And it was her. And she said she had had a bad day at work and was driving around in a darkened forest to unwind. And he said, "Well, recount to me." And this guy's a psychotherapist, so he's used to dealing with people's recollections of events. He said, "Recount to me exactly what you experienced." And she said, "Well, I was driving around and I saw a sticker or something on the back of one of their vehicles that made me think that they did something with Bigfoot. And I think one of us had a Bigfoot sticker or something on the back of our trucks. And she said, I wanted to go tell them about my sister and I and these creatures that we would run into in the forest called monkey bears. And my friend said, okay, what else do you remember about the evening? And she said, well, I remember they were acting like there was something that they wanted to hide, which was true. We had just had that cube experience. And they didn't act like they were too interested in what I was telling them, which is true. We had other business to attend to. And she said, I just got up and left and went away. And he said, you don't recall anything strange about it, or any unusual behavior on with anybody? And she says, no, I just left. So she doesn't remember the urination thing. She doesn't remember the encounter being so odd. And my friend went on to say that when they were in university, they had studied some parapsychology stuff, and she was always the person that was very receptive, to outside influences. And he said it would make sense that she could be influenced by something else, another non-physical intelligence. So it got me thinking, perhaps men and women in black aren't always the other. Maybe they're human beings that are being controlled by some other force, maybe against their will, maybe, with their.
That is a great observation, Trey. Professor Mack and also Dr. David Jacobs, they keep telling us they walk amongst us, these ETs. And I met one. Of course, I've been meeting some strange people during my investigations and during these radio talks, and I have people contact me, and they say some strange things that only I would understand or know. And but I run into these people occasionally, and it's quite obvious they are amongst us, but they're eliciting like emotions from us. They don't know totally what the human emotions are all about. They're trying to learn that, Trey. That's what the woman probably had a problem with. But that's fascinating. You was able to track her down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned, human emotions, and that was what really struck us, among other things, as being so odd. Is if you approach me, out of the blue, and we exchange a degree of niceties, to be cordial to one another, and I say, Dave, good night. I've got stuff to do. Be safe driving home.
Yeah.
That is nonverbal and a little bit of verbal cueing that obviously I have something else going on. Would you please go away and go do something else? But I'm not being, cruel about it, but thank you. Have a good evening. Be safe. She wasn't picking up on any of that. It's almost like, and you have people that have varying degrees of autism that don't understand always social cueing, in non-emotion or non-verbal cueing.
Right. Mhm.
And it was almost like she wasn't picking up on that aspect of humanity was, either hampered at this particular moment, or maybe she didn't have it at all. Now, based on what my friend said, she was a normal functioning human being, when he studied with her. So, it makes me wonder if perhaps she wasn't under the control of something else, which would be absolutely brilliant, because you had talked about that earlier. Uh, Certain frequencies and things influencing us. What better apparatus for intelligence collecting than something that's already there, i.e., a person who's already there, and they could be a flesh and blood collecting apparatus controlled by something else, and then when you don't need the collection anymore, you just turn it off, and they go back to whatever it is they were doing.
Yeah, you were saying earlier, Trey, that we don't have a full understanding of what really is going on, dimensional, how they communicate with us. They come into our dreams, they take over our consciousness, and they can read our frequencies.
Hmm.
They read our DNA frequencies. We're made up of frequencies. They know how to track us. They really don't have to put implants in. I think the implants, some of them are biological. They go into your bloodstream and into your
Hmm.
DNA and into your brain, and it's a kind of a they're slowly manipulating us again, as they've done for thousands of years. Now, this woman, did she live close to the metals there, Trey?
Hmm.
Did she come
She
in?
lived, from my recollection, she lived about 30 miles. So, the thing about driving around to
Yeah,
unwind seemed odd.
right.
But you mentioned, this being so other. It would be like, me taking this Swiss wristwatch, okay, this Omega watch, and giving it to a banana slug. It wouldn't know what this is.
Mhm.
It would be so alien, so other to it, that I think there are intelligences and entities out there that we cannot even begin to comprehend what they're about.
Right.
And you know, I I have to wonder what all of that was about. And perhaps she was being controlled or manipulated in a way we can't even begin to understand.
You mentioned in your book, you mentioned about portals, and I
Hmm.
did. Have you ever seen one open up and close? You said you had a couple of your friends that were close, and they kind of disappeared. You think
Yeah,
they encroached on a portal and then come
yeah,
back? And also, you
yeah,
mentioned cryptids. Trey, could you talk to us about that?
yeah, yeah. First part is yes, I think that that was what people call a portal. I think that they stepped into a altering of reality or an altering of our dimension, and either they didn't go far enough to completely be enveloped by it, or the phenomena was dissipating enough to where they were able to retreat.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's what that was. Number two is cryptids. Is a lot of these areas also have cryptids, associated with them, and that's not an alien concept either. I don't mean alien like ET alien, but that's not a strange concept either, because you go back to some of the earlier books, like I mentioned, John Keel. You talk about Brad Steiger. They talk about cryptids and UFOs and all being contemporaneous. Being at the same place at the same time. That seems to be the case here too. We have had a white humanoid figure watch our camp uh, one evening, which corresponds with folklore of a white hominid that was seen in that area and has been seen for a long time. We have photographs of our team in the meadow receiving a briefing, and in the background there appears to be a hominid watching us, and that's not unusual in the Bigfoot world, that people will be somewhere and in the background they'll discover something watching them at the wood line. Uh, this area is very rich in Bigfoot sightings. And our experiences are absolutely no different. We've had several wood knocks, screams. Ron Morehouse talks about in the Sierra Sounds the samurai chatter, which is kind of a low mumbling. We've heard that. So it's a very active area for cryptids. So it's kind of the trifecta. You got UAPs, you've got cryptids, and you've got paranormal stuff going on. So it's kind of the full meal deal.
Right. It's like the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah that's on TV. They see these cryptids, and they actually mutilate their cattle or whatever.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
they see a light that comes down like a UFO. Uh, Now you said you've seen craft that comes in and out. They're actually, I saw a documentary the other day where UFOs can just go into a mountain and just disappear. They
Hmm.
can materialize and dematerialize, and that's how a lot of these beings are. They're invisible. ETs can be invisible. I know that from a fact for myself. That I know there's a lot of talking heads are thinking, "Oh, this guy's crazy," but I'm not. I stand up for a lot of experiencers, and on my show, an experiencer can come on and tell their story without ridicule or criticism, because,
Hmm.
like we were talking earlier, the plain, you know, Joe or Jane, they're going to have a story, and
Hmm.
they have witnesses, and take everybody's story to heart and figure,
Sure.
let it go. Don't say, well, you got to be a commercial airline pilot or a jet pilot. I was in the military. You were in the military. We know that we're not really trained for all that stuff. We
Right.
don't know everything about what's going on. So whenever anything like that strange happens, anybody like these pilots, they just started really talking back and forth to each other. Say, "Hey, dude, did you see that?" They were excited too. It's they're trained, they're nautical and everything else, but that's the thing, Trey. That I think that when you have these experiences, that you remember them, you never forget them.
Mhm.
Did you get any readings like magnetic readings, Trey, in that area?
Yeah, we not so much magnetic, and that's something that we're now doing is we're making sure we take compasses out there to look for any geomagnetic anomalies. One thing we do see is radiation.
Ooh.
Is we see radiation spikes whenever we have high strangeness, and as recently as Saturday, we were doing some experiments with dowsing rods where we would ask, certain questions and watch the rods cross, but we were also running a Geiger counter at the same time. And one of the questions is, can you make the radiation increase to 0.13 microsieverts per hour? That's a measurement of radiation. The background of that area is about 0.06. And would you believe that the Geiger counter went up to 0.13 microsieverts per hour when we asked it to?
So they can communicate quite well. Sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything's possible on the other side. They can do anything. We used to call it mysticism. We call it magic, but actually, what it is, it's just technology that's
Yeah.
way out there. So you had some nights that you were afraid. I think you were talking about that you felt different energies, or you saw these hominids or whatever standing around watching you. Did you ever feel? Any of you ever feel like you were afraid for your lives, Trey?
Uh, Not so much as being fearful at the moment. A lot of my team come from law enforcement, military, emergency medicine kind of background, so they're used to being in really hairy situations. Uh, Sometimes when you think about the enormity of what we've experienced, and the fact that we've had some team members pass away and get really sick, it's a little bit of a burden.
Yeah,
What might happen and how it affects your family. We've had hitchhikers, the phenomena follow people home.
yeah.
As recently as this weekend, we had the phenomena follow somebody home. So, what you bring to your family can be a bit unnerving. And that's probably the thing that worries me the most is, how it would affect my family.
Right. There's been a lot of ghost hunters that I know of that's written books, and I got some friends, and they said they brought home some bad, energy. So yeah, I believe that. You mentioned something about you're going to do a follow up book, and
Hmm.
Philip Mantle, who's your publisher, he's wanting you to do this book, and
Yep.
Philip's a great guy.
Yep.
Really like him, and uh, but could you tell us just a little bit about what you want to follow up on?
I will. I'm going to break it into three parts. The first part will be called congruences. And I'm going to go into an in depth study of different places of high strangeness, like the Colorado Ranch I mentioned, like the Bradford Ranch, Marley Woods, places like that that I've become uh, somewhat just intrigued with, since I've really started this. And look at the boxes and the cubes and how all that ties together. The second part is going to be called explorations, and those are going to be some of the further investigations and expeditions we've had out to the meadow and other places. And the most interesting part is going to be the third part, which is going to be called revelation. Is I have linked up with a pretty accomplished hypnotherapist, former Army intelligence guy, and we put a little
Okay.
thumbs up for that. And he has agreed to do hypnotic regression several of my team members, and hopefully we can punch through those screen memories and find out what really went on behind the scenes in some of these absolutely amazing encounters we had.
Do you find it hard to get access to the Bradford Ranch and to Marley Woods?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's difficult. I mean, they're especially Marley Woods. I was talking to another researcher, and we were talking about how difficult it is to get into the Marley Woods. And I'm going to see if I can pull some strings and make some stuff happen. I might just do nothing more than just recount some previous research, but I think that there's still some data to be gleaned just from good old fashioned putting your nose in books and talking to people.
Yeah, right. You're doing the right thing and putting boots on the ground in your team. It's great. Uh, but it'd be interesting. I think you might get access to these places being a researcher yourself, and they know that you've been researching, and so you're more of you're a semi-pro in this area. Or
Yeah,
pro. Well, if you were pro, you'd get paid a lot of money. But if you're
yeah,
I know what it's like being a semi-pro musician. You don't get paid that much,
yeah,
so, but no, but you'd think you'd get access just because of your background, Trey.
yeah. Hopefully so. I mean, yeah, I'm hoping to reach out and touch base with some folks. I hopefully will be talking to some of the Skinwalker Ranch people in September face to face, and we'll just see where it goes. It's kind of an exciting adventure, and I'm real happy to share some of it with everybody.
Sure, I'd like you finish that next book. I'd like to have you back on, and
Sure.
I know what it's like writing the books. Like I said, I'm on my fourth one now, but did three in 1 year. But of course, I'm semi-retired. I have a
Hmm.
little time I can put to the side. You're going to be retired for long, so you'll have time.
Yeah.
So you won't have no excuse to Philip Mantle to finish his book.
Yeah. Yeah. He'll probably call me up right after this and say, "Okay, get going."
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, I just I can appreciate what you're doing and what you're trying to find out the truth. That's what I'm up to. I want to enlighten people. I want people to know the truth. And now I think they're starting to see it because of the latest shoot downs that we've had and things going on, and people are starting to think UAPs and UFOs. And I thought to myself, it's about time we start waking up.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you think, Trey?
Yeah. And that's what I tell people: open your eyes and look around because the world is a whole lot stranger than you think.
Yes, it is. Now, that book you're talking about, when do you think you might be done with that? Probably by summer.
Oh, I am not putting that mark on the wall because somebody will hold me to it. I've got some other projects. I've got about 4 or 5 projects, and depending on how they pan out, will drive how much time I have to write. So I am not gonna, I'm not gonna promise anything.
Yeah, you got to
I
devote.
wish I wish I could, but
Yeah, you got to devote 3 or 4 hours almost a day, five,
yeah,
6 days a week. But maybe the wife will keep you busy after you
yeah,
retire. Yeah,
oh
so
yeah,
you'll have to take her tooling around the country and maybe even overseas and see the
yeah,
places that you've been wanting to see.
oh yeah,
Tell us a little bit about your book and where they can find it, and about your new book. You just told us about that, Trey. Trey
yeah.
Hudson, tell us about your book, The Metal Project.
Yeah, it's Meadow Project Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch. The best way to find it is on Amazon. Just type in my name, Trey Hudson, into the search bar. It'll pop up. We've got it in hard copy, hardbound, softbound, ebook, and audiobook. So probably whatever format you want, it's out there. And the second book, yeah, I haven't really come up with the working title. Is the Meadow Project Further Explorations. That's just the working title. So
I
I've got to probably come up with something really snazzy for that title.
I've had some friends of mine who said they're going to write a book, and I asked them, I said, "Have you done with that book?" Well, no, I haven't even started.
Yeah,
You can procrastinate on these kind of projects, really, but
yeah,
you're doing the right thing by putting boots on the ground and finding out things for yourself and for your team. It beats the heck out of I guess talking heads writing about what you're doing. But uh,
yeah.
Trey, is there anything else you want to tell us that you think that's going to happen in the near future?
I think that we're starting to see the drip, drip, drip of disclosure. I just ask that people keep their eyes open, keep their minds open, and keep their heart open. And
Right.
maybe we'll all find the truth together.
I think the ETs actually want us to have, a consciousness and peace. They're watching our nuclear silos and all this other stuff, so they're curious. And my mom, like I said, she's 95. She was listening to the news, and she said, "Dave," she knows I'm into the UFO thing. She is too. She's seen a few of them, and she said, "You think they're going to come down and hurt us?" I said, "No, mom, they won't. They won't hurt us." Now she's 95, thinking this way.
Mm.
That's she's really into it. So no, they're not going to hurt us. That's you can take my word for it if that's worth anything. Trey, it's been nice having you on board here. Trey Hudson, get his book, take a look at what he's going to be doing in the future. Hear his name, check him out. thank you, everybody. And you've been listening to Dave Emmons Show, and good night now. Bye-bye.
Okay.